Welcome to Unprecedented and Unmitigated Khaled Fatal broadcast. With special interest, greed, and corruption polarizing politics and geopolitics globally, with democracy reduced to a mere marketing label, with our freedom dying before our own eyes, with elected governments and public officials no longer serving the people and failing society and humanity, with ordinary people paying the ultimate price with their lives, livelihoods, civil liberties, and economic prosperity daily, with fellow Americans deceived for decades by the Uniparty. As a citizen, a top business decision maker, or a national leader, what are you going to do next? Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Unprecedented and Unmitigated, the Khaled Fatal broadcast. Today's episode is something that pertains significantly to the U.S. national security and to a decision by President Trump, an executive order he signed a few days ago. And actually, the news around the world has been Trump signs memo allowing U.S. firms to carry out cyber attacks. You'll see that posted here. Now, when I saw that, I had shivers in my spine. So I started thinking the best way to actually alert the president respectfully that this is most definitely the wrong move. And I will explain to you why. But before I dig in, I want you to be on the lookout. We have some amazing upcoming episodes to talk about two huge initiatives we are doing at the MLI Group. One of them is a social impact initiative I am personally undertaking, and it's called the Davos Social Impact Global Forum, whose message is architecting global systems where kindness is stronger than greed to serve people first. This is a conference that's taking place in Davos, Switzerland in the second week of September, in about 3 weeks or so, and also a survivability summit also taking place in Davos in the same week. They are all both at the same location, but they are totally separate functions. One is showcasing how advancing the ethos of kindness and empowering kindness around the world can unite more people to challenge and offset the world that's becoming so much greedier day by day. So it's really championing kindness to overcome greed. And in that, we are actually creating formats where stakeholders who have innovations to do with social impact, it doesn't have to be technology based, anything that helps citizens and people around the world, come showcase this and offer it for others around the world to actually replicate with your permission, to show them that you care. And there are tremendous opportunities to show this, to do. So this is really exciting, and I'll share more in the post. So this is something I'm very excited about, and it's showcasing the will of what I believe to be maybe 95% of the people around the world who want the same thing, who don't want to bother anybody, who don't want to infringe of anyone, but they want to have dignity. They want to live in dignity. They want opportunity for themselves, for their children, for their loved ones, for their communities, and don't want any ill to anybody else. But their will never manifest itself in the way politics and geopolitics and wars that manifest the will and the wishes of small minority. So empowering kindness, and I was fascinated one time to learn how powerful an act of kindness to other human being is in making them feel that there is really hope in this world where it's become we're all suffering around the world about from the fear of tomorrow, and this is done on purpose. So treat it as my way of trying to unify the goodness around people around the world by showcasing acts of kindness versus greed. This is purely philanthropic. On Survivability Summit, which is on September 10th, this is purely, respectfully to everybody, by invitation, recommendation, or qualification. This is not a networking event. This is you come and learn about how the global threat landscape is showcased, as you see from the image I'm posting here. And what do you do next? If you're a decision maker, national leader, you're a corporate leader, with all of the unprecedented chaos and the unmitigated risks and the instability that we are witnessing in the last few months, what do you do next? They're all unmitigated risks. And believe it or not, many of those things can be mitigated, an area of expertise that we have in the MLI group. So be on the lookout for this. But now let me dig into what the president has signed recently, and that sent shockwaves in my spine. I'm thinking, oh my God. So my message to President Trump is the following. Respectfully, Mr. President, it is the wrong move. I don't know whether you'll have it in your ability to reconsider and withdraw that, but I am certain also that many of those who are advising you believe this is the necessary step. And let me tell you also why I think you were advised to do this, and it became like a conclusion that is inevitable. First, it is not unknown. It's actually a mode of practice by the US government to actually hire contractors to do things for it. We've seen it during the Iraq War. Halliburton was a contractor for supplying logistics to the US forces, from food to whatever. So this is not new. However, the moment the president empowers or endorses private companies to go, even though it says under the management, so to speak, I'm paraphrasing, under the direction of the government. When cyber companies start engaging with this now, it's publicly sanctioned, endorsed by the US government. We are now opening Pandora's box. And some of the things that I'm not going to go into great depth and detail as to why it's so bad, because some of it is, we don't want to alert the bad people what they can and cannot do. However, let me just keep it very high level, so at least it becomes my way of perhaps sharing with the president, again, once more time, respectfully, that he is getting the wrong advice and the wrong conclusions. First of all, the getting to that position for the US to want to leverage the capacity of private sector companies who, with cyber expertise to do A, B, and C. This is actually quite alarming because it also tells us that the US government and its all of its apparatus, all of its technical cyber skills, and we have some amazing ones, are not sufficient to address the cyber threats facing the US as a government and as a nation and its stakeholders. So that's actually an alert. And if you recall, I have been warning about this since 2012. I first created the term geopolicyber in 2012, talked about that cyber attacks, and to distinguish it was based on the fact that if you can't name the threat, you can't mitigate the threat. Cyber attacks that these are cyber attacks that are motivated not by financial purposes, but by political, ideological, fake. They could be sponsored by nation states. But those people's economics are well taken care of. And if they are focused to get in, guess what? In time, they will get in. No cybersecurity can stop them. I also warned about this extensively in my two-time international bestseller book, Survivability, and whose foreword was written by none other than the father of supply-side economics, Dr. Arthur Laffer. The problem that I'm seeing here is, which is the president's executive order implies, is the US government has concluded that its current resources are not sufficient to defend or attack or counterattack against perpetrators. One of the key components that have been leveraged about why the president took this was about the escalation in ransomware, the escalation of DDoS, et cetera, et cetera. These are all valid, but respectfully, Mr. President, the worst kind of cyber attacks are the ones coming that are motivated by politics and geopolitics. And what I predicted back in 2012 is the current state of affairs today. We keep calling them cyber attacks, but they're not cyber attacks. They are geopolitical cyber attacks. If you can't name the threat, you cannot mitigate the threat. They are not financial motivation cyber attacks. They are cyber attacks to actually bring a nation down to its knees. It what has been known for years. Many nation states have actually engaged in, and some of them are not attacks, Mr. President, respectfully. Cambridge Analytica and the way it morphed the public opinion in the United Kingdom to vote to Brexit, which was found to be illegal, and the company was actually closed down by the government regulators, et cetera, et cetera. This was not a cyber attack. This was what we would call as a geopolicyber event, because its purpose was to brainwash, and it succeeded. It created enough of a public sentiment that actually led to the vote to Brexit, which many British people now are regretting. So one point here is, conclusion is it's actually indicative that the US has come to the realization it no longer has the supremacy in cyber in being able to defend and launch counter cyber attacks on those who are attacking the US. Secondly, and on that point, I've been calling, nobody is supreme in that space. Everybody is, you measure your ability to engage in that space by the level of vulnerability you have, not by the level of technological supremacy. Because you may be supreme, but if you leave yourself exposed to cyber attacks from different areas, guess what? You're not really looking at the threat landscape and assessing how damaging it can be to you. And I'm talking about to you as the United States. So the government has, in my opinion, has not really addressed accurately over the years, and that's successive Republican, Democratic leaderships, administrations, that the US is exceptionally vulnerable from cyber attacks, even though we are superior technologically than most. How? Our banking sector is exposed. Our media is exposed. We are subject to significant trends that actually could be false, that could derive an outcome in America that is contrary to the national interest. And this is, I mean, we hear stories on daily basis about government installations, companies being cyber attacked successfully. Well, clearly, most of them are adhering to the regulatory regimes, whether it's California, whether it's the US, whether it's GDPR. Guess what? None of those checkboxes exercise, as great as they are, are sufficient to defend against geopolitical cyber attacks. You have to adopt a totally different approach. So that's one. Second part, Mr. President, the moment you actually signed that executive order and you made private sector companies players in that space, you've now made them targets. They've now become actual targets. And where do these cyber companies exist? Where do their data centers exist? All of that now, and they exist, by the way, within the general population. Now they are targets because you've made them publicly announced as part of the cyber military apparatus of the United States government, regardless of whether you will go ahead or the administration will go ahead and publish who are the companies who will be and who are not. I mean, you'd have to be, even if you're a two-bit criminal who doesn't know much, could assume at least the top 10, maybe 20 companies who would be participating, who have the capabilities, the capacity to actually engage with the US government in those things. I'm not going to name the companies. I'm not going to make them targets, but guess what? You know who they are. Most of them are, blue chip companies. Hello, one of them is a fruit. The other one is not is not a mini, but it's not a micro. It's a micro. Never mind. But you know what I'm getting at. All of a sudden now, all of those companies have now become targets to potential or prospective adversaries or enemies of the United States. For anybody who thinks I'm actually scaremongering, I'm going to point out to you a factual basis to my concerns, which is in my humble professional opinion, is 1,000% valid. In the early days of the US-Israel-Iran war, one of the first things that the Iranians did was to attack the UAE and attack specific targets in the UAE that on face value do not appear to be military. They attacked Amazon's AWS centers, and they attacked Citibank. The Iranians deemed that the Amazon centers were actually part of the apparatus in the war on it, and attacked it. And this was during a military operation where targets were pinpointed. So respectfully, Mr. President, by signing this executive order, you have just opened it up as the new OK Corral for anybody who sees that if this particular American cyber company has the capability of offering its services to the US, even if it's not disclosed by the US government as a partner or a service provider, guess what? It now becomes a legitimate target because it will be presumed to be leveraged and its capacity being utilized in counter or offensive cyber attacks. And anybody who sees themselves as an adversary or an enemy of the United States is going to see this. And guess what? They're now going to have the inner legitimacy for themselves to say, I need to take that out before it becomes a tool to compromise me. This is what I'm talking about unleashing a new escalated geopolitical cyber warfare. I don't think that's helpful. I do not know to what level or what extent those who advised you on this action, on signing this executive order, warned you that now an entire ecosystem is now a target and vulnerable. So consider this. Financial institutions, banks, just like what we saw with Iran hitting Citibank, who actually fund or operate or utilize purely for banking services, any of those cyber companies become perceived as legitimate targets for our adversaries and our enemies. They weren't yet. Now it's escalated. So can you imagine now what I'm talking about? The escalation to the US ecosystem, economics, military, banking, cyberspace, and the compromises that could hurt the average American people in disruption. Just consider the telecom companies that can be believed to be associated with these cyber capabilities you are trying to empower. This is going to increase their exposure to geopolitical cyber attacks. And we've seen it before. We've seen it before. Respectfully, again, Mr. President, 5 years ago and before, you hardly heard about a top technology company, American technology company, being hacked. The Apples, the Googles, the Amazons. Guess what? The Microsofts. 5 years ago, you never heard. Why? Because core to their function was to sell themselves as we are the greatest custodians and defenders of your online cloud services. Come to us. Don't go to Tom, Dick, or Harry or whatever, because we spend billions on cyber defense. Mr. President, they've all been hacked multiple times already in the last 5 years. In fact, in 2024, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we published a story on this. Apple, which prides itself on its privacy and its security, had to alter its operating system more than 18 times, specifically because it got compromised due to hacks. So my point here is you've now, with this executive order, accidentally or inadvertently, but unknowingly, maybe you weren't advised properly by your specialist, that you've made American cyber companies targets. You made the communities they exist in targets. You made the data centers they utilize targets. There's many other stuff, but for the time being, I will leave it at that and keep it very, very short. Respectfully, Mr. President, it's the wrong move, and I hope and pray you will withdraw that. And there are many other ways that this, as elevating the capability of the United States to defend itself and counter those who mean us harm, there are many ways to do this without this kind of exposure. One last thing, as you probably know, and the others who are watching this episode would know, I was recently a candidate for California governor. It says here, former candidate. I'm now former candidate. One of the key components of what I pledged to do, was to turn California into the best cyber-defended state, not only in the union, but in the world. And there's ways that this can be done. And it's not just simply following the standard template of cybersecurity. Respectfully, this is not going to work. You still have to do cybersecurity significantly better than what is being implemented. But alone, it is not sufficient to defend national sovereignty, corporate security, or the lives and livelihoods of the American people. If you want to know more, I'm available. Please reach out. And if you don't, that's absolutely fine as well. At least my conscience is clear. I've done my civic duty. I've done my civic responsibility. I've alerted my president. I've alerted the American people of an imminent threat. And now my conscience is clear. And guess what? It's all in his hands. But he always asks us to do our part before just we rely on him. Last but not least, I hope and pray that you do the right thing to correct this mistake. Respectfully, again, I bid you farewell on this topic. So before I close, let me summarize by bringing back the topics of the two summits we're doing in Davos, Switzerland in early September. The Survivability Summit, if you want to find out more, go to the website survivabilitysummits.com and you'll find more detail, and at least you'll then be able to engage to either request an invitation, get qualified, or get recommended. And to get more information about the Davos Social Impact Global Forum and perhaps join us and find if it's compelling for you or not, go to dsigf.com. You'll see the code here, and then hopefully we'll be able to see you in Davos, Switzerland in a few weeks. And keep this in mind: the Davos Social Impact Global Forum and Survivability Summits will take place in 4 locations per year come 2027. So until then, and before I close, let me just also conclude by saying the following. Always remember, kindness is stronger than greed. Until I speak to you soon, look after yourself and others, and take care.